Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski, I'll be your host for today. And before we begin, may I just remind you, the best way for this podcast to grow is if you make sure to click the subscribe button or follow button on whichever platform you're listening to this episode. And also share it with a friend, a colleague, a family member, maybe your spouse. Basically, the word of mouth is the best kind. I'm trying to keep the podcast advertising free, at least for now. And so I deeply appreciate you advertising it. If you find it useful, interesting, entertaining in any way, shape or form, enhancing your life. So thank you for that, and thank you for all of you who are supporting. If you'd like to support the podcast in any other way, please follow the link below. There are options there, and also feel free to reach out. It would be lovely to hear some ideas for the next book to review, or maybe ideas for a concept or an idea, a theme that I should explore. Overall, I love to see what you, my dear listener, and you as a bunch of my dear listeners are interested in, because ultimately I feel like the majority of people who are listening to the podcast are in some way resonating with what I have to say here. And so hopefully by having this kind of one-way, not one-way dialogue of a hybrid of sort, of you suggesting some ideas, maybe commenting under one of the episodes, I can basically delve deeper into things that I can imagine I would be resonating with anyway, because it's sort of a flock of a feather flies together kind of vibe, right? You are here and I am here because we vibe in some way. So yeah, thank you for that. And I hope that this episode is something interesting. So actually today, it's one of those episodes that I do every now and then. I call them monologues. One could argue that every episode is a bit of a monologue, but this in particular, and those monologues that I've been recording over the past years, are sort of longer forms of episodes when I share a few ideas, or one in particular that I thought long enough about that I feel like it's about time I share it with you. And this one in particular is something that came around a couple of months ago, I think. We sort of started joking about this with my girlfriend, and only recently have I realized that this could be a nice idea for an episode, and even more so for a series of ideas and a sort of maybe somewhat of a movement, and I'll explore that in a second, which I think our world needs, and many young people in particular, I feel like would greatly benefit from taking on board such idea in exchange for the one that you will straightforward recognize. So the idea for today, and the title, as you might have seen already, is Big Brain Energy. And I've taken some time to look it up to see whether there is already some sort of big brain energy hashtag or movement, and I've not really seen much of it. There is some, but I was expecting to find much more. And so one of the ideas that popped into my head recently as I was meditating, funnily enough, which one could argue is outside the brain, but whatever, is that this could be a really nice hashtag and a really nice idea for a movement, for a social change, maybe in some way. And I don't want this to be something top down. It's a simple idea, and if you consider the world to be a market of ideas, and especially in terms of economy, for example, the best idea wins unless someone is manipulating the outcomes, then I'm going to, and I'm wondering what you think, by sharing this with you, I'm actually taking that step, that leap forward, I'm going to take it on board and see whether the world appreciates this idea of big brain energy. And now, of course, straight away, let's go into the context of this. We were talking with my girlfriend about this sentence, this phrase, this jokey, I guess it's quite distasteful, really, but this joke that you might have come across, the big dick energy, right? Pardon my French here, but this kind of a word, this kind of a phrase, I don't know what it is, a social phenomena, I guess, and something that came up for me again and again when we joked with my girlfriend that this is definitely not what a woman, but in general, I think a man as well, this is part of the problem, is not looking for, is that there is a lot of negative connotations with that, right? I think first and foremost, it's very sexist. It sort of assumes that unless, and please correct me, unless there is some equivalent for women, I've not heard of one. So it sort of assumes that for whatever reason, it's the men energy, the big men energy that is supposedly something we should covet and strive for. And it's supposedly something that only men can achieve, and it's supposedly something beneficial. Although personally, I don't quite understand the assumption there. Of course, it's such a if anything, it's such a low-hanging fruit of an idea. The idea that just because someone has a bigger junk, for whatever reason, they're more masculine. I guess that's probably what the creator of this expression wanted to convey. I don't particularly know what else is there to be in love of, and the one thing that shows up for me again and again, especially on social media, is this energy, I guess, how I understand this kind of energy vibe. And I remember a few times joking about this with some of my friends when I was younger, is this idea that, you might have a really nice fast car, or you might have a lot of money, you might be powerful. I guess that's the to swing your around is one of those expressions that I guess is reminiscent of this concept. Now, of course, jokes are jokes. It's fine. This is not an episode made to discredit a silly expression, although it is an episode to normalize an alternative, or to propose an alternative that is not only both sexist friendly, but also is normalizing something I would argue much more beneficial to a long-term relationship and health and quality of our civilization than this particular. So something that is very, very prevalent among rather barbarian uncivilized approaches, and this is something that you can see in nature as the greatest of examples, is this this prevalent idea that whoever has the biggest stick, or whichever male in the tribe or in the group, in the pack of animals, is alpha. So whichever is the strongest, I assume, whichever is the potentially the strongest, or at least the most canny in exercising power over others, is supposedly the victorious one. And I think there is some truth to it in nature, which is, and we come from nature, so I assume that's the shortcut there to be had. Because as we said earlier, it might just be that if you consider someone to have a big junk, then maybe that means they're also quite a big person, potentially someone dangerous, just out of their sheer size. But, as we have explored again and again in many books, and as many outspoken people nowadays, some of which are, at the forefront of it probably is Jordan Peterson, at least from my perspective, is this idea that they're speaking up about the idea that actually the world is not about power, and the hierarchy of power, that hierarchy that is supposedly ruling the world according to at least the Marxist philosophy and those that propone it, is actually not true. And our civilization, we are civilized because we merit other qualities than ability to exercise power and force. Now, this is sort of a side point, but the point I'm trying to make here, and I'll put up some arguments for you to explore and discuss, maybe with your spouse, maybe with your colleagues, with your friend, maybe with yourself, or with me by contacting me or commenting below, is that big brain energy is what we actually truly covet and should appreciate long term. And by normalizing intelligence as something sexy, something attractive, we can, if anything, sort of open a new loop, which is going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy of a trend, and therefore actually increase the quality and the ability of us and our peers to articulate, and hopefully over the course of our lifespan and beyond, we can actually make the world a better place by basically promoting intelligence and discussion over violence and arrogance, and sort of the approach that is suggested by this big dick energy, sort of dog eats dog kind of world, which I think many, especially on social media, many sources, mostly just sort of copy-pasted videos present, at least in terms of young men. I think this is particularly important for young men, but since, young women will have to put up with young men, and young men will have to put up with other people and themselves, I would argue that this is a problem that the whole of society and, all of us are struggling with to some extent over our lifetime. Now, a few more things I wanted to say before we go any further is that, for me, the big dick energy resonates with this idea of being arrogant, rude, vulgar. Maybe I'm incorrect. This is my take on it, so please feel free to disagree. And one thing that again and again sort of jumps out for me is that ultimately it sort of makes us sort of flattens our curve of opportunities and hopes and qualities, and suggests that looks is what we should strive for, since biology in the way you look, in the way your body is created, is rather random, and you might have some genes. Some people are more potentially beautiful than others, some people are bigger than others, some people are smaller than others. There are many different ways we can measure our body, but ultimately, because of these measures being to a certain degree limited, you cannot, if you're 5'4", however much you would want to try, you're unlikely to become 6'7", other than maybe doing some sort of crazy plastic surgeries. So I think this even more so perpetuates this tragedy, because if we focus so much on the looks, and if looks is what we cannot in the utmost way change, then ultimately we are putting ourselves down for failure from the get-go. And of course, via working out or taking some sort of potentially steroids or whatever, doing some plastic surgery, you might alternate your body to a degree, but there is a limit to that. And if this is the only perspective, the only lens through which you judge others and you value others, then truly I would say the world is in a dismal state. And of course, that's not the case fully. I do believe that there is a lot of, as I said, merit in this world being appreciated, and the market of ideas is constantly in flux. This is, for example, why great ideas become commercialized and make money, and other worse business ideas fail. At least that's how it works in a sort of, a free economy, free market. And in the same way, as you're choosing your partner, as you're choosing your friends, there are certain degrees to which, maybe more or less consciously, you are choosing them based on your values and morals and of your expectations about them. And now the point of this little monologue that I'm gonna share with you today is that I would argue we should normalize more and more the sexiness of being articulate, intelligent, able, mind-able in particular, rather than a muscular and sort of powerful. Of course, as we've discussed again and again, there is a huge benefit, and I would argue it is a part of our everyday life to be powerful enough to carry ourselves strongly and be able to defend ourselves. But there is a very big difference between being able to cause damage if need be, but choosing not to, and just boasting about being a monster and not really paying much attention to any other qualities of yourself, since you're such a big energy person. And there is a huge ego in there, which I think in exploring your mind, in learning, in growing, actually becomes more humble and therefore sort of diminishes. But let's explore that in a second. Now, the first thing straight away is I'd like to talk about these ideas, the mind versus the body kind of thing. We have to agree, and I think it goes without saying, we judge the book by its cover. There apparently it takes us something like a few seconds maybe to determine subconsciously whether we find someone attractive or not, and whether we consider someone to be looking scary, dangerous, happy, and so forth. We're really good at that. Our instincts are just too smart for us, so however much you would want to boast that you are not judging people by the cover, as they say, judging people by their looks, well, I'm afraid that unless you're one in a trillion, you're probably doing it every day anyway. It's a part of life. I don't think it's anything bad. It's, if anything, the negative comes after we've judged, because if you do act differently upon others based on their looks, now I think that's where we can sort of explore the morality of the whole shebang. But let's just agree from the get-go, right? There is a certain degree to which we will judge others by looks, and especially in the dating pool, at whichever state, at whichever stage of your life you might be, whether you're just starting to date, maybe you have a long-term spouse already, there will be people around you, and you will have to discern every now and then, subconsciously and consciously, whether you find someone attractive or not, and that's completely normal. It's just a part of our existence. The thing is, though, just because we do that does not mean we have to see this judgment and these looks to be of more value than. Now, of course, just to reiterate, you're probably unlikely to be interested in getting to know someone more unless you like them from their looks, even just a little, right? So this is unfortunately the probably the unstoppable truth, that if you in case of a dating scenario, if you do have someone you're not attracted to, it's unlikely that you will be open to delve deeper into them and understand them better and kind of get to know them. Of course, those situations happen, and that's a fair game, but this is sort of beside the point. The idea here is that for the most part, once that initial stage of appreciation of one's looks happens, what you do next and what we value in others is where my big brain energy idea steps in. Mostly because, funnily enough, what we look for in people, similarly to what we look for in products on the marketplace, will over time lead to people's behaviors or products in the marketplace changing, right? It's the kind of demand-supply idea. If, for whatever reason, from tomorrow, everyone out there would announce that what they look for in their spouse is their ability to play the piano, over time, for certain, many more people than usual would start learning how to play the piano. Now, obviously, this is a silly little idea, but you get the point. Whatever we look for over time will, in the social sphere, will affect the way it's a sort of a trend, right? Like similarly to buying a certain type of a phone or certain type of a car, or whatever. The cultural norms are in constant flux, and there's always something in fashion and something going out of fashion. You might notice it with the changing seasons of clothing. Now, something that our parents potentially, people 30 years ago used to wear, now this is considered vintage, and yet again it's in fashion. Probably in 30 years' time, what we're wearing today will come back as in fashion because it's vintage, and so forth. So the point here is, what we will look for is we'll probably promote and create more of, and I'll come back to that in a second. Now, coming back to body and mind, something that I'd like you to think about is, the obvious there. You will age, right? We are all constantly changing, and at some point we will not be as beautiful and young and healthy and strong as we used to be. It's just a way of life. It's a cycle, right? In the same way as a plant sort of sprouts, becomes a full-fledged flower, and then withers over time, in the same way our bodies over time simply get used up. And of course, through medicine and many new inventions that we're constantly creating, through our amazing capability of alternating the world around us, we might sort of prolong our vitality. But let's be honest, one cannot compare someone being 60 with someone being 20 in terms of their looks. Unless both of these people would be completely, plastic surgery created and therefore making them look the same. We can tell if someone's young, and in youth, that's where beauty is most often observed. And of course, beauty standards change as well, right? If you look over the ages, the beauty standards for women and beauty standards for men are constantly changing. This is also something that is very cultural, depending on where you go in the world. Somewhere someone tanned might be more attractive, considered more attractive objectively, and in another place someone who's completely pale might be considered attractive. But still, we will all age, and therefore, if we rely and emphasize the body and the looks so much, at some point we will find ourselves clinging onto something that is no longer there. And especially from the perspective of finding your long-term partner, I would argue that finding someone who does have something more to offer than just their looks, or the way their body is shaped, is of greater quality. And there is also an interesting question for all of us to consider, really. What would you prefer when you're old? Would you rather be physically healthy yet mentally not be there, or mentally healthy but physically not be able to to move much more, or so forth? This is a difficult question, right? And to be honest, like, my first immediate answer is, of course, I'd like my mind to work rather than the body. But of course, there are as many people, as many answers, I think, for this. The thing is, though, observing, for example, even just one of my close friends' grandma being at this point, at this stage, sort of slightly not there through Alzheimer, I can see how much of suffering is there on that front, while she's still fairly able to move and be able to to basically live. But because of Alzheimer, she's struggling to do anything at all, because she's constantly confused and doesn't know what's happening. This is slightly morbid, maybe. It's a topic for sure that all of us will inevitably approach at some point. I do wish you a long life and a healthy one, but at some point, your body will also be decaying the same way as any one of us. So this idea that your mind, rather than your body, is what will likely be more attractive over time, it's like a long-term versus immediate, like a delayed gratification versus an immediate gratification. This is yet again where the big brain energy comes into play, I think, very strongly. And, something that really strikes me as what we value in terms of, observing our society is, just think about it for a moment. How many mental gyms have you seen in the world for adults? How many, I don't know what could be a mental gym. I guess maybe some chess workshops, or IQ workshops, or school for adults other than universities and sort of post-grad schools. It's not really there, right? Like, I mean, a classic example of what one does after coming back from work is you probably go to the gym if you're taking care of your body. Otherwise, you'll probably end up in front of a TV, or maybe you have some hobby that you do. But it's unlikely. For me, it's painfully unlikely how little. It's painfully unlikely for me to realize how little people read and how little people learn after they finish uni, after they finish school, maybe sometimes even earlier than uni. Because of the screens that we're surrounded with, as we've discussed in the Anxious Generation episode, because of the constant chatter that the TV and the phone and the computer screen offers us, which is like a fast food for the mind, because you don't have to actually exercise it to enjoy it. It's like immediate pleasure. We're basically allowing our mind, which could potentially be the sharpest tool of our life, wither, atrophy, basically, become less sharp over time. Now, I'm just gonna write it here for you as a link, the Anxious Generation episode. The thing with this that strikes me as problematic, and it makes sense for me that there is more gyms than mental gyms. There's more physical gyms than mental gyms, because the spirit of the society, the trends, what we see on social media is much more immediate and focused on this sexiness of the body, which is, it's a fair goal. I do go to the gym myself. I'm not ashamed of it. I think anyone who wants to take care of their body better and look better, that's completely fine. But I would argue that it would be much better for you, for me, for your partner, for my partner, and for the world, and in general for our civilization, if we treated mental gym as seriously as we consider our physical gym and physical health. There is so much talk being promoted about mental health over the past years, and for good reason. There are huge amounts of data on how dismal our mental health rates are in comparison to our grandparents' generations and so forth. And this is also what in the book The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt points out again and again. The thing is, though, I would take it a step further and not only consider mental health from the standpoint of feeling okay, but mental health from the standpoint of your mind being able to do things, to learn, to grow, to be cognitively and intelligently active, to be more articulate. Now, this brings us to the second point here about your mind being your sharpest weapon, and I truly do believe it to be the case. There is huge promotion by the man himself, Jordan Peterson, about this idea that you should become more articulate, because by becoming more articulate with words, you can be more, you can actually bear more power in affecting the world around you. It's good to express yourself well, and especially by reading and by writing, you can truly increase your ability to express yourself. On the contrary, if you are just typing texts with all the emojis, you're not really training your articulation muscle at all. You're unlikely to learn new words, and you're unlikely to become more efficient and more articulate as a speaker. And of course, that's not everyone has to be a public speaker. That's completely fine. But I would advise, and I would like the world to be more focused and more appreciative of the articulate and of the discourse, rather than of the noise of social media and of the sexy body as the things we all covet, and we all aspire. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if anyone did such a study, but I'm pretty sure there is much more emphasis among young boys being placed on increasing their quality of look, rather than increasing their mental capabilities. And I think it's simply because that's what it seems the world expects of them. And similarly with women, because social media and all the trends and amazingly beautiful actresses and movies and depictions of women are proposing this amazingly attractive female as something to strive for, young girls are basically stuck in trying to become as attractive. And yet again, they don't have many incentives to become more articulate, more smart, more intelligent, because that's not what the world seems to ask of them. And this is this idea that whatever we expect of others, or whatever the market of ideas wants, ultimately becomes a part of of the world's stage. Now, a really interesting quote here from Plato, just to maybe drive the point home, that actually words are powerful, and there are some that argue that words are powerful than bullets, or words are powerful than weapons in general. Those who tell stories rule society. That's the quote by Plato. If you think about it, all of our leaders, especially those good ones, because obviously politics and not only is filled with not really capable people, simply because they managed to climb those weird ladders that our societies constructed, or weasel their way into the system, even though they don't truly deserve it. But a truly merit-based, truly merit-based hierarchy of leadership usually has at its helm those who tell stories, basically those that can move others with their ideas, and instead of coercing, instead of making someone do something against their will, they speak in the way and they express the ideas in the way that makes others want to do what is being asked of them. And so, they compel rather than coerce. And I think there is a huge power in that in general. If you look at yourself and at your relationships with others, I have no doubt that if you were to tell me about good quality relationships you have with some, they are probably based on quite a good amount of quality and valuable conversations and insightful thoughts and understanding. And you could juxtapose that with some of your family members or friends that, even though you might even call them friends, the relationship with them is sort of just this weird collection of back and forth silly jokes and potentially arguments as well, and maybe, if anything, much more on the power struggle kind of an idea. And this is, I think, especially prevalent among young boys, running around in groups, so to speak. I remember just from my childhood or adolescence, let's say, just how much of our group vibe was determined by these two dynamics, right? Who was more funny in the way of telling jokes about the world and about others, I think most importantly about others, and secondly, who was the most powerful in terms of actually being able to beat someone up. And that's just how, I guess, the youth goes, and it's completely fine. Everyone's on their own journey, but looking back and thinking from the perspective of a young adult, or now not so young but still an adult, I think after discussing this with my girlfriend, I think in particular, the articulation and this ability of being witty and able with words and able with ideas is something that is greatly more powerful than just being able to beat someone up. It's not truly much of an argument if someone just, punches you in the face, because at some point the person who's being punched, through their articulation ability, will lead to the situation where there is no more opportunity for you to punch them, and your argument kind of, stops being an argument. And of course, I don't want to normalize and advertise here articulation and intelligence as a means of diminishing others or beating someone up, quote unquote, but simply to juxtapose this idea of sort of a movie like the school jock or whatever, the school bully, who's potentially powerful but also quite a not the sharpest tool in the shed, as Shrek would sing, and that person who is able and sort of more smart and intelligent, so is able to find their way through more situations than just those that demand of us sheer force and sort of violence. Now, one more thing I wanted to share with you, a big one, is this confidence idea. There is this idea, this concept maybe, that fake it till you make it, right? And to a certain degree, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, or if you've explored any of the books that we've discussed before, there is certain truth in that, right? If you think about manifestation or visualization, that's a sort of a fake in it. If you are just trying to change your state, change your energy, you can put your via your mind, your imagination, you can put yourself in a better state than you are. You can sort of fake yourself into thinking you are where you're not, or you're feeling better than you potentially could. But there is a huge advantage in a confidence that is earned, because I think a fake confidence, is a short-lived, unless it's exercised and then actually practiced. And so yet again, you sort of go onto the other side of what I'm expressing. So this concept of earned confidence, right? How do you earn your own confidence? Because confidence, if maybe the way I understand it, is a belief in oneself, or a sort of self power of oneself, and an attitude that you are able, you can meet the challenge head on, and so forth. And I think the four major pieces that lead to confidence over time is self-discipline, mastery of a certain, thing, activity, or, your mind, experience in general, and then strength from going through hardship. Now, obviously, these four are greatly interlinked. Through experience, you will become a master over time if you really practice, and you adjust and you learn and you grow within that niche of whatever you're doing. Through self-discipline, you can basically have that experience being routinely done again and again. And I cannot stress this enough. I think in whatever you are trying to do in your life, persistence and self-discipline of sort of routine, making something into a habit, is something that, from my perspective, is of the greatest, the easiest quality, because since our days, are in majorly consisting of habits of different sorts, if you can make something into a habit, you're much more likely to actually emulate and become the kind of person you want to become through that habit. If you are a person who's in a habit of going to the gym, I can sort of imagine how your body looks like. If you are the kind of person that has a habit of drinking Coca-Cola every morning, I can also imagine how your body feels and looks like to an extent, because compound interest, as we've explored again and again, over time will give you the results you're asking for, right? Ask and you shall be given. So, this power of earned confidence over fake confidence is another aspect that I'm gonna explore in the videos I'm going to mention in a second. I sort of jumped the gun there, but this is something that really interests me, because I've seen somewhere I think on, I don't know, on social media somewhere, this guy explaining that there is someone who made this business of adopting a hangar into an insides of a private jet, and then influencers can rent it for hours, on time, to film videos within, and then supposedly post as if they are, flying in a jet. Now, that's, for me, it sounds rather abstract as it is, but I think it tells you something. It tells us something about the incentives there are, right? If someone can earn money on renting a fake inside of a plane for someone who's potentially earning money by making a video inside that fake plane, there must be an incentive there. There is something that both of these people, obviously, let's leave the rentier aside. That's just an ingenious idea. I'm more interested in understanding what makes people want to rent that plane, fake plane, and actually record videos within. And obviously it's because on social media we seem to appreciate and gratify those who show us lavish, lifestyle, which, as this example shows, it's not actually true. And those people that for whatever reason, because of their looks, because of what they wear, because of where they are, they apparently are watched by many, and they can monetize the attention of yours. That's ultimately what social media is doing, right? It's monetizing your attention, and so those who can monetize it more efficiently than others are the ones victorious in that market. The thing here is that's obviously fake, right? If I were to tell you that that particular influencer that you're watching doesn't actually have a home studio, doesn't actually have a private jet, doesn't actually own that amazing car they show or whatever, how would you feel? What does that mean? Does it make them more attractive or less? Well, I would argue that if that's why you're watching them, because of these things, then obviously now you've lost all the interest in them, because they don't have those things. They are actually faking it until they make it, because ultimately through your attention they can fake it until they make enough money to potentially buy it. Although I don't know what they do with their money later on. The thing here is, though, yet again, if the incentive structure is there for us to appreciate and sort of promote the behavior of those influencers, for example, renting a fake plane and pretending that they have a private jet, so you could feel potentially, I don't know, envy, amazed, I don't know what kind of an emotion that might stir, then we are promoting that to happen, right? It would be very different if, for whatever reason, and I have one colleague from Jiu-Jitsu who's publishing a book in the summer. I will actually probably have an episode about his book, and then with him as the author, just to support. It would be a very different case for that social media person if you were interested in seeing people read more, right? So for example, on his Instagram, he shows himself writing in the morning and offers a little writing lesson for people, and some people are interested in that, right? There is some traction there, which is amazing. It's for me, it's heartwarming. But obviously the incentive structure seems to be much more set, at least right now in our day and age, to those that either look outlandishly beautiful, potentially not true, or, you know, they maybe expose their bodies or whatever, or they're living lavishly, you know. And the world in general seems to promote and consume content that is much more looks driven than thoughts driven. Not as many people want to hear about a writing idea as they want to see a shaken booty, I guess. You know, I might be wrong. I hope to be wrong. I'm afraid I'm not, though. So, you know, now let's go into that incentive structure. I've been sort of tiptoeing around it, right, for quite some time. What I've written here for myself, just to maybe read for you, is by normalizing this idea of intelligence as a sexy thing and making it a popular idea, we will create and promote incentive structures that will lead to more people learning, becoming wiser and more articulate, and therefore we will make the world better and more intelligent by making intelligence sexy, right? So if on the cover of, I don't know, Forbes would be a headline, intelligence sexy, right? People read more as, you know, dating polls show people want to see people want to date people that read more. If that was the case, I have no doubt you would not hesitate anymore and you would just pick up that book and read it. Unfortunately, at the moment, I don't think that's the case. And so my idea with this big brain energy monologue, and also the videos that I'm planning to start making on and just sharing on Instagram and other platforms, you know, such as TikTok or whatnot, is to do just that, you know, to normalize it. I'm gonna make this as an experiment, right? I'll always hashtag it big brain energy. And let's see what happens. I'm looking, you know, I'm wondering whether this is going to have some traction. I hope this will make someone think and feel more inclined, or think more about, you know, grabbing the next good read, or, you know, maybe getting off of social media for a moment and taking some time to learn a new language, or, you know, speak with a person, discuss some in-depth thoughts, maybe do some philosophy studies, whatever. I kind of feel that this could potentially, and in general, this definitely is, just on the mini scale of me sharing this with you, this will lead to some of us being more likely to enhance our mental ability, our cognitive ability, and our intelligence. And, you know, of course, I'm not advertising or, you know, pushing for everyone out there to be a genius. That's impossible, right? And I understand that you might not be interested in learning a new language, but there are so many ways in which you can become a more like a big brain energy kind of a guy or a girl, that I would truly, empower you to do so. You know, I think most importantly, your spouse will thank you for it, even if they don't really think about it at the moment. Over time, they will. You know, as we said earlier, we will all age, and at some point, as much as we might want to, you know, pretend at the moment that we're always going to be young and beautiful, at some point we will not, right? Hopefully we will still look presentable, but if you are with your girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, you know, only because of their looks, then you're in for a big disappointment over time. And if anything, you know, you're making you're setting yourself and them in particular, most importantly, up for failure, right? Your relationship might not manage over time if that's all you're looking for, because at some point you will no longer be as attractive, they will no longer be as attractive, and then potentially, you will be inclined to cheat or, break the relationship and find someone younger, more youthful, that looks more attractive, because if that's what you're after, then, I guess that's what you're gonna try to get. But an alternative to that, an alternative approach to that, is to not only take care of our bodies, which is of great quality, and I understand that, but also to take care of our minds and our hearts, ultimately our soul, because you are in this for a long run, and you should consider your mental abilities to be at least as important as your physical, and I would argue even more so, because you're much more likely to have a quality long-term life being mentally healthy rather than relying only on the physical. So we've talked earlier about this, and just I have a quote here for the very end of this all, is that no man is better than his incentives, right? So whatever the incentive structure is out there, whatever the society is appreciating, whatever potential partners will look for, whatever your friends are, cheering for when you do, over time, these incentives will shape your actions, and the world is unlikely to become more intelligent and less big dick energy driven if we don't set up structures and if we don't promote, and if we don't, reimagine that intelligence and ability to figure out problems and solve ideas and speak different languages and so forth is something sexy and attractive and looked for. So yeah, I'm quite hopeful about this. If anything, I think this might be one of the better ideas that I've had in a while. So let's see. Let the free market of ideas check me and see what happens. Now, the invitation for this week for you is to, first and foremost, share this with a friend, this idea, of course, not necessarily the podcast, although feel free to share the podcast. Talk to your spouse, partner, friend, colleague, and just ask them, let's see what they think. Consider for yourself. I'm really keen to hear the results also, so please feel free to comment or send me an email what you think of this. If this isn't a good idea or a bad one, you might be the first one to check me. And my second invitation for you for this week is to choose one of the habits, one of the activities that you could embark on, or maybe you've been considering to do, but you've just, postponing it. Maybe it's that book that you should probably just pick up and read, and do something about your mental ability, your mental health, your cognitive ability, your articulation skills, your intelligence. Basically, treat yourself to a habit that will promote your sexiness of your brain over time. And there are many ways to do so. So, I think the best way to go about it is to find what's yours and start practicing it. Then I can just share at the very end that for me, I try to read every day. I write a little something for myself every day, and I listen to ideas. I contemplate. I listen to a lot of podcasts and books to consider them for myself and to inform myself a bit. It also helps that I've been working recently at a company that is expecting me to study, because I do like studying. So yeah, that might also be the case. Maybe it's time for you to go back to studies or buy yourself some book to learn. So yeah, other than that, as I said, I hope that this episode will bring upon you, my dear listener, and my, yours and mine life some change, and let's see about it. I'll see what also my videos on social media do, and if someone feels inspired. If you've not yet, please make sure to follow or subscribe. This helps the podcast to grow. It's also the sign for me that I'm doing something right. I will be doing it anyway, but I would deeply appreciate, and I'd love to have you among our growing listener base. And other than that, if you'd like to support the podcast in any other way or just learn more, follow the link below as per usual. So have a wonderful week. Stay big brain energy sexy. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.